my pleasure and honor to introduce Unity's friend and speaker for today, whose message is entitled, It's Time, the Reverend Stephen McAfee.
Thank you, everyone. Welcome here. If we really got that, like, we're done. Yeah. I want to talk with you about something today. I called it It's Time because I think it is. And what I mean by that, have you reached ever a point in your life where you knew you were supposed to do something, but you didn't want to? It was just too much effort, too much, I need to get in shape. I need to quit smoking. I need to go apologize. I need to start going to church. I need to start meditating. Any of those, I need to. Not I need to from somebody on the outside telling you you need to do this, but something inside you saying you need to do this. And you don't want to. It's just, it's work. You don't want to do it. But at some point, it's time. And when it's time, you'll do it. You won't do it until it's time. You'll resist up to the last minute often, but when it's time, you'll do it. I remember when my dad was a World War II pilot, and he got into service when he was 17. And everybody smoked. So he started smoking when he was 17. He smoked most of his life until much later on. And for years, his doctor and us and his family and other friends of his, after they didn't know about smoking back when he started. But when they knew about the effects of it, everybody was saying, Dad, you should quit smoking, or Bob, you should quit smoking. And he understood intellectually why that would be a good thing to do. But he didn't want to. And despite all of the pressure from the outside, he never did it. And a couple times he went, yeah, okay, fine. And he would sort of quit, and he'd quit for a week or two, and then he'd start up again, because he didn't really want to. And then one day, he went through the house and threw out all his cigarettes. And I said, oh, you're going to try to quit smoking again? He said, no, I'm done. Which is a different attitude than I'm going to try to quit. And he never smoked another cigarette his whole life. So there are times in our life when it's time for us to do something. And often we know that before the time actually arrives. We can kind of feel it coming. I remember when, many years ago, when my wife and I were dating and seeing each other, and I was thinking, she's the one, but I didn't want there to be a one, and I didn't want to take the risk of asking her to spend her life with me, and I wasn't sure how all that would go. Some of you are familiar with that scenario, perhaps? Yeah, and so I knew before I brought it up. And even when I brought it up, which I won't tell you that whole story, but I didn't do it real well. But anyway, it worked. So what I want to talk to you about is something that I think it's time for, at least for many of us in this church. And I think it's happening. I'm saying it's time not because I think we should be doing something that we're not. I'm trying to recognize something that I see happening here and put words to that, because I see a lot of change happening here in this church, which I personally really like. And whether this offends anybody or not, if I do, it's not my intention to. So you can then take it as an opportunity to practice forgiveness. So one way or the other, I'm helping. But for many of us, particularly in this church, we have moved past the phase where we want somebody to make us feel good for an hour while we're here. That's not what this church is about anymore, in my opinion. It's time for teaching and learning what the truth is. And then not just hearing the teaching, but living the teaching. And that requires a whole different set of efforts than coming to some place and expecting somebody else to inspire you and make you feel good about yourself for an hour, and then go home back to the same life and the same thought patterns and the same behaviors and the same reactive patterns you've always had and live like you always did. You can be inspired for an hour on YouTube, but they can't give you what's here. You can't get from the visual media the community and what the spirit of community is that you can get here. You can't get the live in-person teaching face-to-face that you can get here. And I know it's not just here, but it is happening here at this church, from my perspective. And another shift that's happening is, and this is the offensive part, maybe. So just, hold on. I have seen teachers up here in this church and in many other places, and I have been one of these teachers that says the right words, but there's no substance behind them because they're not really coming from my heart and I'm not actually living what I'm preaching. There's no more time for that. What we need to hear here is people who are living what they're teaching. And that's what you are hearing. That's what's going on. When Wanda gives talks, and I can't be here every Sunday, by the way, but every Sunday I miss, I listen to her on YouTube afterwards, or whoever's speaking. But the things that are being shared here now, in this particular phase, from my perspective, are genuine spiritual teachings, and by that I mean they're what was really taught by the great teachers. And they're genuine because if you apply them, they're transformative. They will change who you are and how you think about yourself. Or more accurately, they will allow you to start being who you are that you've been denying. That's the power of real spiritual teaching. If you take it in and work with it. If you just come and hear about it and say, well, that's a nice idea, it will remain a nice idea and it will be powerless in your life. Because it has to take root in the heart. That's where things are nourished in us. That's where the life in us comes from. Even physically. For all the wonders that your brain does, your life does not come from your brain. The life energy that sustains your body and keeps it going is your heartbeat. Stop that, and the brain in 2 minutes is done. So, but stop the brain, make it unconscious, the heartbeat's function. So, the essence of this is, we have to take these teachings to heart in a way that we're willing to be transformed. We're not willing just to hear about it, and we don't want to just hear about it anymore. That's the other phase in the journey. There's a phase in the journey where we want to hear about all the new ideas, because they're fascinating, and they're awesome. And we explore 10,000 different things. We go to 100 different groups and read 20 different books a week, and we get all these new ideas of that's a great idea, ooh, this is a great idea, wait, there's another idea, I see an idea over there, and we chase after all these ideas. And it's really fascinating. But after a while in our journey, we realize that none of them are helping our life. Because we're chasing ideas instead of doing the work on ourselves to start living as children of God. And when you're willing to do that, your life will change. And the teachings that are being presented here are tools to help us do that. If you just say to Reverend Wanda, or me, or Michael, whoever else happens to teach you, or Susan, whoever teaches you, if you say to us, boy, that was a nice talk, that's nice to hear as a presenter, at least for me. I still have an ego. That's nice to hear. But you know what I would rather have happen? I'd rather see you grow into what I'm talking about. I'd rather see me grow into it more. And so, Paul writes about this in the New Testament. Now, I make a confession also. Paul's not one of my favorite people in the New Testament. Sorry, Paul, but he wasn't my favorite back then either. He's still not my favorite. But he has a few good things in there. And one of the things he talks about is the difference between receiving spiritual milk and spiritual meat. And there's a time in the teaching where we feed people milk, like little babies and infants, because they can't handle anymore in a digestive system. So we give them just simple little kernels of ideas that make a difference, but we don't really get to the meat of the matter. So what I see going on here now is there's a transition from wanting milk to wanting solid spiritual food. I would say meat, but I'm a vegetarian, so I can't really but this solid spiritual essence that we really want. So I want to read you just a couple of things, because I'm a Bible guy, I like the Bible, so sometimes I don't like it because it makes me accountable for things I'd rather not be responsible for, but here we are. So I want to talk to you about teachers for a few minutes, and we don't talk about them much, that I notice anyway. So I want to talk about them a little bit. This is from 1 Corinthians 12, the chapter right before the love chapter, the 13th chapter that Lynn quoted. 1 Corinthians. God has appointed these servants in his church. First, the apostles. The apostles were the 12 that Jesus chose to go out into the world with his energy and his work and his mission. The second, prophets. The third, teachers. The fourth, miracle workers. Teachers come before workers of miracles. Why? Because everything you know how to do, somebody taught you. They're the miracle workers. They taught you to read. They taught you to do math. They taught you about God. They taught you about the Bible. They taught you about how to ride a bike. They taught you. Teachers are critical in our learning at various stages, including spiritually. After the gift of miracle workers come those who have healing gifts, and then helpers, and then administrators, and it keeps going on down the list. But teachers are right up there, because they're really important. So, 2 more short readings about teachers. This is also from 1 Corinthians chapter 3. Brothers, this is Paul. Brothers and sisters, I could not speak to you when I was there before as spiritual people, but only infants. I gave you milk to drink, not the solid food of our teaching. Because you were still focused on your flesh, and there was still strife and envy and anger among you. So when one person says, well, I follow Paul, and another one says, well, I follow Apollos, who was another teacher, and I follow so-and-so, what you're saying to me is you're all still stuck in the world. Who is Apollo? Who is Paul that we matter? I may have planted things, Apollo may have watered them, but God gave us the growth. We are just servants. It's God who is doing all the work. Don't follow us. So, and the last one, this is from the book of Acts. It's a chapter I don't think I've ever heard anybody read or talk about in any church anywhere ever. It's a very small little section. An angel of the Lord spoke to the apostle Philip and said, arise and go southward along the road from Jerusalem to Gaza. The area was deserted, but Philip listened. He went down the road, and later there beheld a man from Ethiopia who was with the queen of the Ethiopians. That man was responsible for all her treasures and had been to Jerusalem. He was now returning and seated in a great chariot, and he was reading from the scroll of Isaiah. The spirit of Philip then said, go talk to this man in the chariot. So Philip ran up, saw that he was reading from the prophet, and Philip said to him, do you understand what you're reading? And the man said, how can I unless someone teaches it to me? So Philip rode in the chariot with him and began to teach him. Have you ever opened the Bible thinking, oh, I'm gonna read this. Maybe it's time. I'm gonna start reading this and actually see what it says. And you start reading and go, what is this talking about? How does anybody get anything out of this? And when you hear Wander or me or whoever, and you hear somebody and they talk about it, and in a way it makes sense, hopefully, and you hear that, you think, how did they get that out of this? Where did they come from? it just is a bunch of gobbledygook to me. And somebody begot somebody, and somebody begot somebody else, and then somebody did this, and then did that, and then Jesus curses the fig tree. It's like, what? And these are life principles I'm to live by? What is this? So a lot of what we've learned about the Bible has been somebody, Charles and Myrtle, Reverend Geis, Mary, Wanda, me, somebody, Bob, somebody teaching us about these things in a way that we like, oh, okay. Then you go back and read that and you go, oh, there it is. You notice that? Yeah. And sometimes, at least if you're like me, you go, how did I not see that before? Or Michael, we often talk, will tell me something and I'll think about it and I'll go back and look and go, geez, it's right there. And I've read that 1,000 times and didn't see it. So back to teaching now. When Yeshua, Jesus, was alive, he was called many things. Many things by people who didn't like him, and many things by people who adored him. Do you know what he was called more often than any other title in the entire New Testament about him? Teacher. Rabbi. My teacher. Yep. That was the role in which the majority of people who knew him saw him. And it's a role he definitely accepted and saw for himself as well. So, also I like dictionaries. This is old school. You got to understand, I grew up in an era where if you gave talks, you were supposed to quote from the dictionary. Because dictionaries were like an important thing. They were books. They had words in them that you held in, just in case there's younger people here who have no idea. And you can look up meanings of them, what words actually meant, and where they came from, so you can see their etymology and history of where they came. Yeah. So I looked up teacher in the dictionary, and it comes from Old English taken, and it means one who demonstrates. Isn't that interesting? One who demonstrates. So again, I don't know about you, but I see this happening here, and for me, if I want to learn something, I want to learn it from somebody that I can see is doing it. My grandmother, my dad's mom, was an unbelievable gardener. She was an organic gardener because it was before the days when you had any choice to be anything but an organic gardener. And she could grow anything. You could walk through a woods with her and she could tell you everything in there, what was edible, what wasn't edible, and what they did and what they didn't do. She was extraordinary. If you want to learn gardening, you should have talked to my grandmother. She got it. I one time, just as an experiment, because I had more time and money back then, I took a college class at IPFW, back then at IPFW, on gardening for a whole semester, and about companion planting and how to get rid of bugs and all these different things. And then I went and talked to my grandma. And I said, I'm going to plant this garden, and here's what I learned in the college course. And she said, that won't work. And I was like, yes, it will. There's a lot of science behind this. She said, oh, well, try it. It won't work. I tried it. It didn't work. Grandma said, do this. I said, Grandma, that won't work. She looked at me like, excuse me? I said, okay, I'll try it. It worked. Because she'd had like 30 years of what actually worked and learned how to do it. It wasn't theory for her. It worked. Or sometimes she would say to me, that will work, but you don't have to go through all that. You could just do this instead, it'll work out. So, spiritually, isn't that the kind of teacher you'd like to have? Somebody who can give you some of those advices that work because they've done them? They're actually living them in their life. And when you see them not in church, when you see them in the grocery store, when you see them in their home, when you see them at some public function, and you watch how they speak, and you watch how they engage people, and you watch the energy they carry, and you watch how they connect with people. And if the way they do all that is not at all what they're talking about when they're here, then stop listening to them. Talk about being offensive. Seriously, you're wasting your time. And if you see somebody that is doing in their everyday interactions with other human beings what you're hearing about here, then even if they never teach up here, pay attention to them. Get to know them and start talking to them. They have something. And that's one of the differences when Yeshua was teaching versus, there were lots of teachers back in the era he was teaching. Lots of teachers. Lots of Pharisee teachers, lots of Sadducee teachers, a whole bunch of people in the priesthood, lots of mystics, lots of people teaching. And many people studied with many of these teachers. There were great teachers too, like Hillel and Shammai and different ones. And they heard many of these teachers, and when they heard Yeshua teach, you know what they always said about him? Where is he getting this? How can he speak with this kind of authority? He's not like saying, well, I think maybe God's like this. Jesus never said those words in his life. Well, I think maybe God's like this. Never. Because he was living this spirit that he was talking about. All the time. In his business, in his home, in his relationship with his apostles, in his relationship with his family, in his relationship with the people who hated him, in his relationship with the Romans. He was the same guy. He was the child of God in every one of those relationships and never forgot it. So if you want to learn about how to live as a child of God, he was somebody to listen to because he was doing it. And I think that's what's shifting is many of us are saying, I'm ready to do this. Now, it's time. What do I do? What do I stop doing? How do I do this? Because at some point, when we're learning about truth, we have to learn and hear what the truth is. But then at a point after that, we have to go, now, how do I do this? I don't just want to believe it. I want to do it. How do I do that? So I think that's what's going on here. And I think that when you come here, I hope this is your experience. Actually, let me know if this is your experience. When you come here, you're being exposed to lots of ideas. But more importantly, don't you feel a spiritual presence here when you're here? Don't you feel something invisible going on that isn't what I'm saying or what Wanda is saying or what the music is playing? It's something much fuller than that we can't say with our mouth and we can't play on the piano or guitar. There's some power moving here that is inviting you to get closer to God and wake up and make your life worth living. Do you feel that?
Yes.
Because I do. I think that's happening here. And I think that's what people sensed in the original Jesus movement was there's some vitality here. There's something going on here. I've been in this church since 1976. And so, that's a while. And there have been wonderful phases in this church, and there have been other phases, quite honestly, here we go with the offense again. There have been other phases in this church, and I'm here, but there have been other phases when this was a lifeless place. They still understood the teaching, they still had the books, but the vitality wasn't present. And that vitality comes from individuals in the congregation and in the leadership who are dedicating their lives to living as God's children. Not thinking about God every now and then. And that's powerful. And people want that. People are looking for that kind of connection. So back in that days when Jesus was leading the movement, people would feel that, well, how do I connect to this? How do I get to be part of this? And have you noticed that the seats here are getting fuller and fuller? Just a couple of years ago, they were not this full. And I don't mean during the lockdown. but there's something attractive about being here because people feel something's going on. Or maybe I'm fooling myself. But do you notice that? Okay, so do I. So here's the two things that I want to suggest is that when we have the blessing of God having sent someone here to teach us, pay attention. Don't decide, I can show up another time. I'll think about it and play video games on my phone while they're talking. Be present. Take in what the teaching is that you're being given. And when you have an opportunity to assist somebody else, be the teacher. Doesn't mean you have to stand up here. Because the important teaching in our life doesn't come from us up here. The important teaching in our life comes from connecting with each other. So be the teacher. Take that moment where you can share something that you know is real because you're living it, and offer it to somebody who hungers for it and hasn't found it. Not because you're better than them or you know more than them, but because you understand how much they're yearning for what you already found. And that you're willing to just show them a glimpse of it and say, you can step into this if you want to. And I'll be here to support you if you want to. But I'm not dragging you here, and I'm not going to beat you over the head with it. I'm just inviting you. You know, when we invite people to our home for a dinner, or invite people to our home for an event, we don't show up with clubs and swords and say, you better show up, my guy. You know, it's an invitation. Take it or leave it. But if you come, you're going to be welcome and you're going to have a wonderful experience. That's God, isn't it? Isn't God saying, I have this wonderful state of consciousness that you can access anytime. And the door's open, and I'll show you how to get there. Want to come in? And you'd be surprised at the number of people that say no thanks and walk the other way. But if you're one of the people saying, yes, I do want to come in, then walk through the door and really do it. And give yourself the opportunity of being a student from people who have something profound that will help you, and be a teacher when you have something profound that will help somebody else. And anything that our egos try to wrap around that, just kind of laugh it off and, yeah, well, there that goes again. Here's my ego thinking I'm special because I'm standing up here. Here's your ego thinking you're special because you're standing up here. None of us. We're just us. That's what's here. The reality of God is, here it is. I mean, look around. This is it. This is it. There's not something that's going to happen to you in the future where suddenly you see everything and you get it. You can get it right now. It's present right now. I have a friend who's a rabbi. It's my last story. We'll move toward our meditation. I have a friend who's a rabbi for many years. And he was studying with this great Buddhist master, who, if I told you the name, you probably recognize. But he was studying with this great Buddhist master, and about enlightenment. He was really seeking enlightenment. And he was convinced this master was enlightened. And he studied with him for years and years, and practiced meditation, sat with him. And one day, he was with the master, just the two of them in the ashram, and he said, I wish just for a moment I could see what you see. And he said, I'm going to give you a very special gift. I'm going to let you do that. And so my friend was like, wow. And he said, come sit. And he came sit for me. He said, I want you to place your hands over your eyes. Close your eyes and place your hands over so you can't see anything. So he did. And he said, now I'm going to tap you on the forehead. And when I do, open your eyes and you're going to see what I see. He was like, yes! So he sat down, he got himself all holy, and he closed his eyes, and he put his hands over his eyes, and he waited breathlessly, and the master touched him on the forehead and said, now. And he opened his eyes, and he said, it looks just the same as it did before. And his teacher said, that's what I see. This isn't magic. This is spirit. It's present. It's available. It is invisible, but not intangible. We can experience it. We cannot hold it. We can't put it in a box. We can't give it to anybody else. But it's right here. And it's in me, and it's in you, and it's amongst us, and it's available to everybody all the time. And so To me, it's time to stop pretending we're not divine. It's also time to stop pretending it's also time to stop pretending that being divine means I can control every situation in my life to make it the way I want. Stop pretending that. You can't. Give it up. Just be the divine that you are. And watch how it unfolds. It's, life is moving forward. And whether we're being drugged or skipping along with it is up to us. But we're going to move forward. Because that's what it does. So you can be drugged, like by wild horses, and complain the whole way about how battered you are following your spiritual path. Or you can dance down the road and go, wow, this is pretty amazing. That's up to you, not up to God. But that you will move forward, that's going to happen. So I'd like to just sing you a short song and we'll move into some meditation tonight. So you can, you're welcome to sing along, hum along, or just listen. When I see your light, or hear your voice, when I feel your touch, all there is love. Let's just take a few moments of silence. Remember, as we move into this silent time, just a couple of brief thoughts. Yeshua, for all that he did and was and accomplished, did not say, I am the light of the world. He said, you are the light of the world. And he didn't say, I am made in the image and likeness of God. We were told we are all made in that image. So when you see yourself as something broken, as a victim, as a poor me, as a I'm not good enough, as I'm not as good as they are, when you see yourself in any of the ways that makes you believe you cannot live the divine image that you are, recognize that that is contrary to what every great spiritual teacher in our history has ever taught. This moment, this breath, you are fully the image and likeness of the divine creator. Made of the same essence, given the same faculties, just on a smaller, individualized scale. Sometimes those ways that we see ourselves that hold us back are excuses to not stand up as the light we are. You have the freedom in this meditation, as we come into this silence together, and you will have the freedom every moment after to discover and reveal the light of God that you are. So let that light come to the forefront of your consciousness in this silence. We thank you, Lord, for the gift of this time and your Spirit. Help us remember that the light is never afraid of the dark, because it never experiences it.